Welcome, Nick. Pleased to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I love it. And just to quickly kick it off, you've been a hero of mine for a long while now. Since I read your book, Sleep, that changed the game for me completely. In more ways than one. Not only around sleep, but there's a line in there, we're going to get to it a bit later, that fundamentally changed my outlook on me as an individual, as a layperson versus the athlete, which has triggered so much of my thinking and courses that I've run and businesses that I've run, all on this one line that sits in your book, which is pretty powerful, and I think shows the power of the book, not just only around the topic of sleep, but it's bigger than that for me. It was a real, a learning opportunity to see how athletes think versus everyday people think. And for me, that was a game changer. So I thank you, my man. It's a pleasure to have you with me. So, what I thought we'd do is, if it's okay, I thought we'd sort of start with your origin story in many ways, which sees you joining Slumberland and maybe your progression through Slumberland to become that sort of marketing director, as it were, and then maybe that transition into, Man United.
Well, it was an interesting transition, Andy. I love sport as a kid, like most people do, um, and I just fell into the world of furniture. Slumberland was a brand, so I suppose in those early stages, brands meant something to people,
Mm.
and we still connect with that today, don't we? The origins of the brand, but I think at that moment in time, I had, I was just interested in paying the bills.
Yeah.
I had a young family growing. I had no interest in the sleep industry whatsoever, or Slumberland, or their raw warrants, and all that sort of stuff. I had no interest in this. It's just paying the bills. But when I jump into that world, it started to create a fascination with this crazy world of sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really interesting that, and I think we see this in so many people's origin story, that they end up in this place of meaning and purpose without a big plan. There was no plan of, I know what I'll do for the rest of my life. I'll be, to find deep meaning and purpose in the world of sleep. It was just, I'm going to take a job to pay the bills. And as, you progressed through that company, you find yourself as the managing director of marketing in Slumberland, which I think marketing director, sorry, of Slumberland, which is, a big role and a big title. But then there's that point, I think you mentioned it, where you've just like, no, this is not quite for me. Just maybe talk us through that bit.
Well, I suppose it's just like, 1 minute I was running around on the playing field, cricket, rugby, football, pole vaulting, whatever. Then you suddenly find yourself with a wife and a family. You suddenly find yourself in a sleeping world with Slumberland, and along that particular process, it was. I think I have to reflect on my father, you know, who invented petrol injection, which back in those days was a completely engineering feat of.
Yeah.
It's not like Mr. Dyson of today. It was a new thing. And so I always spent time knocking around the garage with my dad and making wine and making things and doing things with petrol injection and stuff like that. I had no idea what was going on, but I think that whole translated through my life. So when I joined Slumberland, I was just a rep, um, an uneducated, five O levels type of person, um, and I loved the dedication to sport. If you want to do it, I spent a bit of time as a golf professional where you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and knock 2,000 balls down the range,
Yeah.
job, and you're still there before the members have all gone away, and you get paid nothing for it and stuff like that. So I think it all translated into that. So it's a crazy period of time when I shifted from being a sales representative, running around in my car selling products and paying the bills, and then suddenly I found myself as the international sales and marketing director within 4 years.
Wow.
And you just go, sometimes you just sit back and just, why are they putting this so much importance on me? And now I've got to create strategies. I've got to create this. And I was wandering around the world and stuff like that. But the only thing that always fascinated me was in the area I was working, it was so important for me to, make money and pay the bills. But this sleep thing seemed to be something that people just ignored.
Yeah.
So we collaborated together to create the first UK sleep council because there wasn't one. Taken for granted. You know all about this. It's about addictive behavior. It's about all sorts of stuff. And it's just like, wow, this is an amazing health pillar that just has no definition to it, does it? It's just like, we just do it. And I was bringing up a family. Anybody out there who's listening to this had been parents and bringing up kids, and I've got grandparents running around my house all night tonight. And it's just a crazy set of challenges. So never mind pandemics or this or that or life choices, that's what it's all about. It's just like these crazy things come up. And the most important thing is how to put it in context. And that's probably, why I sort of had a midlife crisis in my early 40s, Andy, as you know all about. And I just went, this is an amazing subject, but nobody cares about it.
Yeah, and when you say that midlife crisis, what was that? Because I think very often that's like a call to adventure. We'd almost describe it a little tug to something a bit different.
My mom, maybe it's my brother, maybe it's a bit of all sorts of things. But I just went, I can't leave this behind.
Yeah.
I can't just, because I've created a family. I've got great kids. They've got grandkids now. They all have mortgages and families, and I can't leave all that behind. In those days, it was just, there's got to be something in this.
Yeah.
Has to be something in this. But it wasn't a sort of decision to do something.
Yeah. So when you sort of stepped out of it, you didn't have a perfect plan.
No, it was just but probably it was, Andy.
Yeah.
But I didn't know about it. So
yeah.
I asked in my final year in my contract with someone to, bring people in, and I'm going off and doing my own things. And then little things came in. I just thought, that'd be interesting for the company. That'd be interesting for that. And I just fell into sport. And I wasn't doing it for any particular purpose.
Yeah.
But on reflection, I probably was.
Yeah.
Because inside their world of high performance and high achievers, that maybe I was in the wrong industry. So if I moved over there, that might be okay. And there was a great guy called Dave Fever, who was the physiotherapist at Manchester United way back, late 90s. And he just came up with these little words, which we call rehabilitation, dehabilitation.
Yeah.
That's not even a word, Dave. Rehabilitation is very easy, but dehabilitation, what's that? Well, maybe we're spending all the time working with these players and athletes, rehabilitating them. But actually, when they're away from us, they're dehabilitating.
And how did that connection come up with Man United?
It was simply because in my power as the sales and marketing director for Slumberland, which is a major brand internationally, in my final year, I had the ability to write checks out. So I wrote a check out to sponsor Oldham Athletic.
Brilliant.
Now, Oldham Athletic was just the local club. Right? And most of the workforce in the factory were Oldham Athletic fans.
Fans, yeah.
You support your local club, don't you?
Yeah.
I thought it'd be really nice, I wasn't thinking about my future or anything like that. It'd be really nice if they could see the slumberland on the front of their shirts for all the workforce.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And so I did it. But I didn't realize at the time that that was the breeding ground for the class of 92,
That's right. Yeah.
just United, and treble-winning sides. So we had Bury Football Club. Paul Scholes came from Oldham.
Yeah.
Oldham. So the sort of class of 92. So I didn't even know that. So I just put our company name on the Oldham Football Club. I didn't realize that Oldham Football Club was a breeding ground for a treble-winning Manchester United side. And I didn't also realise that Alex Fergeson used to wander around Bury and Oldham looking for these players.
Yeah.
So there was a premiere of a film called Broken Arrow. You probably know Christian. It was a film, and they had a premiere in Bury. And all the Manchester United team were there, including Alex Fergeson. It was a premiere of a film. They did it all in Bury, a Bury Football Club. That's another story. And so, and I went along to it. So I was sat in a room with all these guys, and suddenly the conversation started. So we were watching a film called Broken Arrow.
Yeah.
In Bury, watching Broken Arrow, which was John Travolta.
Yeah, I remember the film now. Yeah.
Travolta, Christian, not Christian Bale, it's the other guy, young guy. But anybody's watched Broken Arrow with John Travolta, it was all about planes and stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah.
We were there in this cinema in Bury, and also the Neville brothers, Gary and Phil, had just been to the factory. We'd done some pictures and stuff like that with them because they were playing for the England squad and they were part of that. I was working with their father called Neville.
Neville was a great name.
It was a great name. And it was just a combination of weird things that just all sort of came together in that sort of north-west area of Oldham Athletic, Bury Football Club, Gary and Phil Neville, Beckham, Scholes, Nicky Butt, David May, Alex Fergeson, Dave Fever, and it just happened. And we
send them a letter.
Stuff.
Yeah, I can't remember. Did you write them a letter at some point? Because I'm sure I remember you saying it to me before that you wasn't a big user of the technology at that stage, and that you wrote a letter. I don't know if that was to Man United or Oldham.
Yeah, because it's in the book.
Yeah.
The sort of letter from Alex. So we started having these conversations and all sorts of stuff, and at one point it was sort of like, well, hang on a minute. So I actually wrote a letter to Alex, and he just went, let's do something. Yeah. And he gave me a quote straight away. And I can't even remember what the quote was, but I've probably got a book somewhere. But it's, he just said, I think this is the most amazing thing that we could do in sports is not just concentrate on things we don't know about, but concentrate on things we do know about, but maybe in a slightly different way. And so I started working with him privately. Then he, Dave Fever and stuff like that. And then his great friend was Sam Allardyce.
Okay, yeah, there's another one that likes the sort of marginal gains approach, yeah.
Just back then in Bolton, he was the manager of Bolton, and they were just smashing it.
Yeah,
absolutely. They would just look at everything. And on his little journey, he was asked to be the England manager once, and he did a presentation. They just went, "Now that's too radical."
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like, what? And it was just great. And then all that sort of journey along that road, it was just a wonderful time when none of us knew what we were doing, Andy. None of us knew what we were doing. Neither me or Alex or Dave Fever or or Sam Allardyce or whatever it was, or Arsene Wenger in in the stage of that journey.
Yeah.
None of us knew what we were doing, but we knew there was something there.
Yeah, and I think that is really interesting about this. And just to set the stage for people that don't know as much about football, you were probably working with, set all your allegiances aside, one of the greatest football teams ever that will probably never ever see a team like that again. It was homegrown talent, the class of '92 that went on to win the treble. If you could ever be transported back in time or into a club or be part of a club, that's got to be it. And I know you always underplay it, but in many ways, you were still an integral, marginal gain of that whole experience. I mean, I just think it's really fortunate. And what I also want to say is the way that, and I wonder, did you get this from your dad that you touched on earlier, that sort of outside the box, different approach? Because there's obviously been lots of bright minds come through the system, and there's been lots of science around sleep for many, many years. But it took you and your unique background at Slumberland to see something a bit different. And then to, maybe there's a bit of luck involved and timing involved to Alex Fergeson and all the connections. But together, like you said, you sort of thought, hold on, maybe there's something in this. Let's explore it.
Yeah. I don't know, Andy. It's my mother and father taught me certain principles about all sorts of stuff. When I went into golf, I also had to do lots of other things, like manage members of the golf club, and they were way, way above me. I was just a 17-year-old, and these are CEOs of like GlaxoSmithKline and stuff like that. And there was lots of stuff around that. So I used to clean the toilets. I used to make the clubs. I used to coach them.
Yeah.
It was, one day when I was coaching a particular CEO who's multimillionaire, way beyond my status, and he was trying to play golf right-handed because everybody played golf right-handed.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him, and as a 17-year-old, I just went, "But you're left-handed." Yeah. And we shifted him from being a right-handed player to a left-handed player. And he started to be able to play the game better.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like the concept of that's how it should be. But actually, if you look a little bit closer, you can switch that. And he became the best left-handed player in the club because he was the only one. And that sort of made him feel great. And he was just like, "Can I do this? Yeah, of course you can play left-handed." So I think it's always about that little challenge of like, well, that's the way it seems, but maybe there's another version of it, or maybe you can find another version of it. And that's why I think probably along that whole route, I've always been driven by, my father, who just said that there's a different way of putting petrol into a piston.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and that's what you've continually done. That's been overlooked, I think, by so many people. It was sort of almost there under our nose, and then you came along, and this relationship formed with Man United, which ended up with you being termed a sleep coach, which I definitely want to get to in a second. But how was it embraced by the players in the club?
Dropping back to your first point, the one thing is be coachable, right? I've heard this a number of occasions, and I like the term. I think you like this. That team was completely open to being coached by Sir Alex Fergeson, by changes, by everything. There was no boundaries in there. If I said, "Let's do naps in the afternoon," they went yes. Nicky Butt, David Beckham, blah, blah, blah. We had no phones, no social media. If Alex said this, if Dave Fever said that, we just did it. And beyond that, people like Rob Swire, the physio, we just said, just open your mind up to being coachable. Don't just get coached by anybody. Don't
Yeah.
just take everything on board. That's the wrong thing. But with professional advice, amazing, you can make a change. And that's what the class of 92 was about. They were completely in our hands, but
Mm.
they were coaching us as much as we were coaching them because they had the talent. And that's, I think, the difference. Just open your mind to being coachable, but don't get led down a garden path.
Yeah, I think be selective, but when you are selective and you've got that confidence in someone's expertise, then throw yourself into it. And that's, I think, a really important
Not
point.
easy, Andy.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing, and to see the results that they gained through that approach says it all, doesn't it? And I know you've worked with lots of clubs since who've got amazing results, and I think it is this marginal gains approach. And this leads me to a point that I mentioned at the very start of the podcast in the book, where you talk about the difference between an athlete and the everyday person is that the athlete, when they're really attuned with the goal that they're trying to achieve, are willing immediately to embrace any potential way to optimize their performance. They've made this like really clear crystal link with what's important to them, winning gold or winning the Premiership. But what I found really insightful for me, having worked with lots of athletes and CEOs and hedge fund managers and everyday heroes and parents, if you peel back the layers as to why they want to win gold or be a great parent or be a great CEO, everyone ends up in the same place. They end up in that same place of to be fulfilled and happy. So for me, that was a real penny drop moment. It was like, oh, hold on a minute. If my dreams are to be fulfilled and happy ultimately, why are my dreams any less important than the Premiership footballer or
Yeah.
the athlete trying to win gold? They're not, right? So why are we not, as everyday heroes, embracing all of these initiatives such as sleep to improve our performance marginally? Because guess what, we'll be a better parent or better at our careers. It's the same stuff. And that was really, for me, it was a revelation to hear that in the book. I was like, oh, I get it now. That's the bit that I've got to try and almost help people realize, that your goals, your dreams are just as important as the Premiership footballers you admire or the heroes on the Olympic track. It's the same stuff.
More important.
Yeah.
You know, even more important. It's a great way to put it in context, but they're even more important because every elite athlete, every person on this planet, the key things to their success is exactly what you've just described. Because they all have the same challenges. They go out there and perform, whether you're parents or you're Olympic athlete, whatever you are. But to get there, you need to have these fundamental things in place. And so that's why it's always been fascinating. You work in elite sport. Now I just work with people who are trying to achieve something. And it's all simple stuff.
And then in terms of what were the sort of practical things then you were doing with the players at that time to again try and optimize their sleep?
Well, I think some of the fundamental things was this perception about get your 8 hours and
Yeah.
if eat too late and your room's this temperature and stuff like that. All this sort of stuff, but nobody listened to it. So we tried to just redefine the language. It's just try to find a way of, I don't know, making them listen. I don't know. It was just being able to move them from where they were to a different journey. And it's not easy, to make that behavioural shift, is it, Andy? It's not easy to make that behavioural
No.
shift. But you just have to try and find little things that just move things along. The aggregation of marginal gains, little steps, not big steps. Don't challenge people too much. So we started talking to the guys about sleeping in cycles. We like that. Get your 8 hours and all that stuff. So get 5 cycles or 4 cycles. Let's break the day up a little bit because we knew about polyphasic sleeping and stuff like that. Let's break the day up like a game. It's a 90-minute game. We have a little break in the minute to, take some time out, re-strategize, fuel up, hydrate, then we go again. So the second half is different to the first half. Or the first, because it is a game of 2 halves. What's the objective? Well, don't lose. win, draw, be your best, put your best performance in, and this is how it works. So it kind of makes sense to chop your day up into little segments. It kind of makes sense. And when Alex Fergeson decided to double up pre-season training, which is all about, if you're moving on today's world, it's about Ironmans, triathlons, pushing the boundaries. So when he just bring in double up training before pre-season, he said, what do we do with them when they're in the morning? And they said they're not used to this. So we just thought we'll create a little recovery current so they can have a relax and have a chill out and maybe go to sleep. But it was only because these guys were, if me and the squad said, we're going to do this, and we're not expecting you to go to sleep, we just want you to chill out, take some vacant mind space. And then we started to see different performance factors in the afternoon with data, because in sport you have data. And so David Beckham in the morning, David Beckham in the afternoon, Paul Scholes in the morning, Paul Scholes in the afternoon, with a break in the middle. Oh, what's that all about? And then Arsene Wenger comes along and starts going, we're going to wash our hands, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And when and then you start thinking a multicultural society, because Carlo Torre and Cesc Fabregas and Thierry Henry, they're all from different places. Whoa, that's another melting pot of recovery. And it just wandered along that process of just, there's something interesting in here. Because whilst we had this thing with Manchester United and Alex Ferguson double-up training, Arsene Wenger was really struggling to get Cesc Fabregas to train in the afternoon as well in the morning, because he's in siesta time.
He's in siesta mode, and would go to bed later probably.
Cesc was going like, what? I'm still talking to my family at 12 o'clock at night because that's what we do.
That's the culture,
These wonderful little cultural things started to creep in. There's sort of, maybe that was okay with Manchester United, but it's not okay with Arsenal. Then it may not okay. You have to constantly massage it around to deal with the complexities of human beings on this planet trying to recover.
And I love what you did with I think it's controlled recovery period. So that reframe instantly takes away the stigma of it's a nap. It's a technical, tactical thing that I'm building into my day to optimize my performance is controlled recovery period. And I also love the 90-minute cycles have been a revelation for me, because I've noticed that I sleep in those 90-minute cycles. The research is there that demonstrates that. And you've described it before. It's like walking down a flight of stairs, and you rest at the bottom, you get that deep restorative sleep, and then you come back up. So then you're in light sleep. And I'll find almost on the clock, if I wake up in the night, it's almost always on one of those 90-minute cycles, where I used to freak out a bit like that. Say I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it'd be like, why have I woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Whereas I know I'm due to get up at 5:30. So I've just woken up. I'm at the end of a sleep cycle. I'll use the bathroom. I'll come back to sleep. And guess what? I wake up at 5:30. It's almost like on the button, it's like within seconds I can predict it. And that for me took all the pressure away about sleep and the agony of I didn't get the perfect 8 hours. It's like, well, hold on, I've just in one of my sleep cycles, and if I do wake up at 4 and don't quite get back to sleep, I'm not worried about it, because I know I'll get some controlled recovery period a bit later and catch up. And it's been, again, it's just because psychologically it just removed all of that pressure. My sleep's been optimized pretty much ever since.
Yeah. It's kind of like worry is the biggest disruptor. It always, and when you get to that place like you are, and so you're able to control so many other things in your life. It's, I think the recovery bit, when it gets out of control and you're under pressure, then it's really difficult to control other things, doesn't it? But when you get to that place, it's an amazing place. And using the natural, what are you doing every 90 minutes? Are you getting this? What happens when you wake up in the morning? That's all that sort of knowledge. There's so many people worrying when they wake up in the middle of the night and they can't get back to sleep and stuff like that. But with a little bit of awareness that they should have learnt at school, about that's absolutely natural and how you work that through, So I think what you've been experiencing over that period of time is it just becomes something you stop worrying about, Andy.
Yeah, and I think it's true. And I think even sleeping on my side has been another revelation. I forgot about that because I used to sleep on my front, I sleep on my side. And then I think from a psychological standpoint, you know, I'm not sure if it was you that said this, but it's like if you get the conditions right, you'll be rewarded with sleep. And I think from a psychological standpoint, sleeping on your side, and you mentioned this from, from an evolutionary standpoint, would allow you to protect yourself, for example. If there was a raid in the middle of the night. I know it sounds silly, but these are the things that clearly make a difference. And for me, that's also changed the game, sleeping on my side.
Absolutely. Because, last night I fell asleep with my grandchild called Jonah Bear. He's 3 years old. And he curled up in my bed on the opposite side to his dominant side. Perfectly natural. And I spooned him, in a sense, on my opposite side to my dominant side, because I'm left-handed, he's right-handed.
Yeah.
So we just lay there and we went to sleep. And we woke up this morning and it's fine. And it's just wow.
Yeah.
These lovely little things.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's simple, isn't it?
Yeah, making it more natural. But it's been a big old journey. And I think there's, people struggling with all sorts of stuff. But I think if they ever listen to Andy Rama, and that journey of like sleeping positions, breaking your day up, taking the worry away, they can all be elite performers.
Yeah.
They can all be elite performers because within that whole thing, it's available to everybody, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, and that's the key. And I think it is, and that's why I love the book, because it's really sort of simple and it's almost common sense, but it's just beautifully put. And sometimes you connect with this stuff and you go, oh, that is just, why didn't I do that? That makes so much sense. Why didn't I think of it in a different way? And I think that's been your superpower in many ways. And I know it's taken you on this adventure from sort
of, curb the compliments.
I like giving them out.
Okay.
I like giving them out. So it's sort of taking you on this journey. What I'd really like to know about next, actually, because then it gets even more interesting for me, is that we move on towards David Brailsford and the cycling team and the aggregation of marginal gains. Can you tell us how that came about?
Don't need to give away too many secrets, but I got contacted by a cycling coach working for British Cycling called Mr. Sutton, and I'll leave it at that. He's an Australian coach working for British Cycling.
Yeah.
He contacted me to just like, we're on this whole new thing. We've got the equipment, we've got the helmets, we've got this, we've got that, everything else, but it's all about the human being, which is the energy thing on the bike. So we need to concentrate on that in the aggregation of marginal gains. So we had a little coffee chat in Wilmslow in Cheshire, in a Starbucks. And he just said, I like what you're doing. Right? And he investigated all sorts of stuff. So then I got involved with that process. We would spend hours in Manchester, in what's called the Velodrome in Manchester. And there'd be Dave Brailsford, pre-Sir. Bradley Wiggins was very much the forefront of that. Matt Parker, Shane Sutton, who is the Australian coach who
Tough
really...
Aussie coach, yeah.
That was the guy I met in the coffee shop. And we all came together and like, we're looking for these marginal gains. So we were washing hands, we were looking at this, we were looking at friction between the trainers and the carpets. We were looking at absolutely everything. And so we started that process. But the guy who was in charge of performance marginal gains was a guy called Matt Parker.
Okay.
And so he had this new job of the performance marginal gain. And so Shane introduced me to Matt. and we started to wander down that process. And so we started off looking at, so I sort of pulled this information together to create it into a technique. So we need to, how much does the British cycling understand about circadian rhythms? Number one, KSRO. How much do they understand about the chronotypes, the teams and Dave Brailsford and everybody else? Because that has an impact. Let's look at about our recovery in cycles rather than hours and stuff like that, because that's really important on a Tour de France or a Grand Tour, the Volta, Giro d'Italia. Let's look at that. Let's look about pre and post. Let's look at that. Hang on a minute. Where's Bradley actually sleeping? In this somewhere, in the Northwest that we have no idea about. So it started a whole conversation. And then we just wandered along that 7-step process of going to the individual riders' houses, talking to their partners, and then have they got children, have they not got children, looking at their environments, trying to create that, bring that along into there, looking at the training schedules, looking at this. I remember sitting in the velodrome in Manchester with Jess Varnish, and we were working out how we're going to wash our hands in 2009.
Yeah. You're ahead of the game.
Happy birthday, because we don't want viruses to translate the whole process of going to Olympics, because it's 4 years. And so we just went along that route, and they were so open to anything.
Yeah.
And I remember one day, Andy, when I went into this room, and there was Phil Burt, who was the lead physio, Victoria Pendleton, Bradley Wiggins, Dave Brailsford, Shane Sutton, Matt Parker, some of the top game changers on the planet in this room. I think Steve Peters was just wandering in the corridor. And I just said, well, if that's what they're sleeping on at home, let's just recreate it and put it in a bag and let's take it on tour. Opposite side to your left side, Dave goes, makes sense. Phil Burt, from a physio's point of view, goes, that makes sense for postural care and recovery. Yeah. Oh, really? And I said, yeah, well, and I was just looking at some research today that came up, one of the top 10 things in lockdown and everything else is fresh linen on your bed. Yeah. Fresh linen, get into it, think you're going to have a go. So way back then in 2008, I just said, we need to have fresh linen in these sleep kits for 3 weeks on the tour. And they all just sat there going, what?
Yeah, I bet they did, yeah.
But in their own little world with their families and their girlfriends. And, well, actually, when I put in on the bed, I kind of feel like I want to get in. It's cool and it ticks all the boxes. And I think I'm going to get a good night's sleep. So why do you only do that every 3 weeks? These are professional athletes. So we bring that from there, we bring that in there, and we just create that. And we create some linen. So I went off and designed some fabric that was able to really quick and wash and stuff. And so literally in 2012, when Bradley Wiggins became the first UK British rider to win the Tour de France, he had fresh bed linen on his little sleep kit every night for 3 weeks. And he was doing that before. So it was like, in some respects, it's like this helmet has been designed by somebody who's like crazy. And the clothing and the bike and the gears, and you can pick their bikes up with 2 fingers, Andy. So light and they're so vulnerable and everything else, and all the taxis and everything else. And it was really great to be involved with just like simple recovery stuff that Geraint Thomas, Chris Froome, the squad, Team Sky, with all the money and everything else, it was just like, wow. And they just took it off the park in 2012.
Yeah, they absolutely did. And I think one of the big symbols for me of the whole marginal gains approach and Dave Brailsford and that amazing Tour de France win. And again, this is, been involved with two of those clubs now, not only Man United, but also Team Sky and whatnot, was that I think what's symbolic of that whole approach was the sense of carrying the mattresses from hotel to hotel. And that's what all the press picked up. And I'm sure if you asked anyone, marginal gains, what's involved in that, they'd go, oh, I know, carrying the mattresses. So your actual involvement is the sort of almost symbolic of the whole principle, which I think is must be really thrilling to be a part of.
Like, how are we going to make this happen? So on the first tour, the Giro d'Italia, we sort of took a few toppers and a few bits, And then on the second tour, the Vuelta, we took a few bits. And then we just sat down and went, nah, it needs to all go in a kit.
Yeah.
We played, and we need to put that in there. So we did the Sky team coach.
Oh, I love it.
We did everything. And then we had this little team of people. At one point, it was going to be me and Matt Parker in a transit van. And it's just like, nah, come on. And so let's do it for the whole period. And the whole process was just completely crazy. But it's sort of transcended into whatever your gain is, it's there. You can find it. You don't have to hunt for it. Be coachable. Don't put any barriers up to being the best you possibly can be. And engage with those little things, because it's there in front of you. British Cycling and Team Sky just completely wiped the place over in 2012.
Yeah.
Have they done it since? Well, no, because things change.
Yeah.
Things move on. Dave Brailsford is not involved with British Cycling and Team Sky. Now he's with Ineos, and now he's with Formula One. Strangely enough, who am I working with?
Yeah, so who are you working with? Let us know.
Formula One. Mercedes, Formula One drivers, you move on, don't you? And certain things get left behind. And it doesn't mean to say that they're not going to try and do it, but, who's the top of the Premiership? Is it Manchester City? Consistently smashing it. Little blips every now and again when Liverpool sort of get their game. Yeah. But, there is a club that just seems to get it right season by season. Little blip, and they lost to Liverpool, but they're back up again, aren't they?
Yeah.
When you look at these things, and Jurgen Klopp will say it, Pep Guardiola will say it, Dave Brailsford will say it, Andy Ramage will say it, I will say it, is consistency is your key.
Yeah.
No highs and lows, no shoving around. You can have your highs and lows in excitement and emotion and all that sort of stuff, but you need a consistent approach to your everyday. And that's why linking in with your circadian rhythms, linking in with some harmony about this 24/7 rolling process. If you link into that and you find your little place in that, wherever it might be, that's where your success is going to come. And you can see it right in front of you everywhere. It is a bit of a challenge, but it's there. It's for everybody, if they want it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As you know, and exactly that. I think, all these little optimizations, this, marginal gains approach to life is just as important as it is, to the everyday hero as it is to athletes. Just a couple of things you mentioned there. You mentioned chronotypes. Do you mind just talking about that? Because I think the listeners might find that interesting. This is like whether the lark or an owl is a chronotype, and you can actually test for that, can't you, if I'm right?
Yeah, you can have a test for it, but I think most people understand it. But
yeah,
as human beings on this planet, the brain and bodily functions haven't changed, the circadian rhythms haven't changed, and it's all about the sunrise to midday to sunset, and that's about a light exposure called daylight, and inside that daylight it's called a blue light energy light, which creates two things. One is serotonin to make you perfectly happy and active and everything else, And without that blue light in the daylight, it's about melatonin, which suppresses things and sort of takes you through that process. So that's our journey every 24/7. So if you take two human beings, right? Are you a PMer or an AMer, Andy?
I'm an AMer, absolutely.
I'll look at your profile. So if you take an AMer and a PMer, so it's just two human beings and they're outside all the time. The sun rises, and what happens in an AMer's world is that light passes through your eyelids into a light receptors behind your eyes, into a pineal gland, which is a little gland, and that light triggers a hormone called serotonin, which unsuppresses everything. Bowel, bladder, appetite, mood, motivation, alert. And that's what we need in those first 2 phases of the day to be really active. Without that light, we produce melatonin. And melatonin just suggests suppression. It doesn't make you go to sleep. It just suppresses those things down. So that's the 24/7 process. So if you have two human beings, the reason why you can spot an AM or a PM or an hour lark is when the sun starts getting close to the horizon. AMers like me and you, the light gets in the eyes, into that pineal gland, and starts whacking up serotonin. So me and you just go, woohoo, let's start.
We're on it, yeah.
But the genetic twist for a PMer is that doesn't trigger as quickly. It's about a 2-hour phase delay. So me and you are like reacting to this stuff like mad. It's not us as individuals. It's that little gland and the light receptors. But the PMer is a couple of hours later. So it's not having the same effect. And so they want to wake up later. But the bit about, so that's a genetic twist. You can't do anything about it. So that's why you have owls and larks and PMs and AMs. So once you identify that, all of the PMers on this planet are in an AMers world.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Taking the kids to school, work, get to work, all of that stuff. So the PMers, there's probably more PMers on this planet than AMers in sort of my experience. It's not specifically any piece of research. But when you identify that, Andy, is that if you are having to start your day earlier than your normal chronotype wake time, and you're dragging yourself, it's a bit like me and you, if we had training at 9 o'clock at Manchester United, we'd be up at 6:30, we'd fuel up, hydrate, bowel and bladder, do some mental challenges, take the dog for a walk, get loads of light, turn up at Manchester United's training ground in Carrington at 9 o'clock, ready to go.
Yeah.
The PMer is still 27 minutes past 8, 30 minutes to Carrington.
Trying to get up, yeah.
So they'll have breakfast at the club. They
Yeah.
won't hide, won't bow, they won't do. So they're just pushing themselves, and that drags itself through the day. So I think the wonderful thing about chronotypes is that when you know Pep Guardiola's chronotype, and the coaches, and the medical staff, and the kit man, and the administrators, and all the people who book all the appointments, the players, the academy players, the female, the women's team, everybody else. When you get all that together and put it together, you're like, how can we collectively work together with this thing? Because if you ask them to do this, then that's not going to produce success. If you ask that group to do this, so it's just like the accountant, the finances, everybody from the manager top down, if you just look at everything, and to the parents of the kids in the academy, you just look at all of it and go, we can create a new environment, which is all about me and Andy do this stuff in our day that protects us, makes us feel good, makes us proactive, makes us do wonderful things. And you're also going to ask me and Andy to do stuff when we're not really, but we know things to do to protect ourselves. So we can do little things before we do that. So the whole journey is not about one standard, is it, Amber?
Yeah.
It's just, as long as me and you know the moments we can take advantage of, and also the moments we need to protect ourselves from or do other things to, yeah. And I think that's where you end up with sort of addictive behavior.
Yeah, very very often.
Don't have answers for pressure. You don't have any answers for worry. You don't have any answers for stress. You don't have to. You don't have any sort of answers. But you and I would always sort of go about if you and I are going to be asked to do something very late at night, we know what to do before then to protect it. And if you and I are going to be asked to do something in the morning, we know how to optimize that. And if we've got friends and family who are not quite like us, we can give them some good advice as how to, we're all going to go and do this, we're all going to do that, but you need to do this and I need to do that. And they're just subtle little wonderful things. The chronotype is just probably the key thing to manage your everyday.
Yeah, and I think it's just really powerful around, again, the whole marginal gains approach to life, isn't it? That it's a one-size-fits-all AM world, whereas if you've got a PMer, if you could restructure their work, for example, so that they could come alive and take their time of a morning to be optimal. Maybe they start at 10 and finish a bit later to the AM. All these things are worth considering, and maybe as an individual you can sort of stage the game in such a way that supports your natural chronotype. And one quick question around that, and then I want to talk about light and lux before we wrap it up. Can you train to be a morning person, or is it you're going to be fighting against that, pretty much forever because it's a genetic thing?
No, it's not. Of course, we have to adapt, but the key thing is knowing where you are at the start of the race. Right? At the start of that race, if you know you're an AM and a PM, then you can go along that journey. Right?
Yeah.
And you can adopt an AMer's world if you're a PM, and you can adopt a PM's world if you're an AM. Of course you can. But you just have to understand the consequences of that and how to manage that process. So it's like me and you, Andy, sort of like, AMers, and suddenly we're surgeons and we work nights. And we go, how are we going to do that? We want to be surgeons. But our schedules are going to put us under pressure. So as long as we know the sort of starting point, then we can make certain adjustments to protect that process. Right? So it's not about just changing who you are to create something else. It's if I'm an AMer and I'm suddenly going to be a pilot, great, well done you. That's a great career. And you're going to do long haul, yeah. Well, you understand that particular career and that particular lifestyle is going to have an impact because you're an AMer and a PM as well. If you're a night shift worker, an Amazon worker, you're going to go into sport, you're going to go into this, it's going to have a consequence. And that's why we always trying to factor in is to protect that process. Because if you're already struggling, you may be positive and proactive, but if you're always struggling at the start of the day, then your decisions and everything else that you do throughout your day are always going to be affected by that. So we always want you in a positive mindset that I'm an AMer doing a PMer's job, but it's okay because I know what to do.
Yeah, there's that awareness.
And that's why I think, the sort of, not to touch on anything personal stuff, but that's where you end up compensating because you don't know. And if you start compensating because you don't know, and you wander off into a PMer into an AMer's world, or an AMer into a PMer's world, or suddenly you're not a parent, now you've got kids, or now you've got challenges, that's where we start to dip into things that are not good.
Yeah, almost to keep ourselves stimulated, for example, because we're tired or lacking energy, I can imagine, exactly. And we can, so these things can be at the root of
some supplement, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or we find ourselves in dark places. So it's you can adapt, but you need to know
your starting point. Yeah, I think that's really key. And then as part of that, we were talking about light there. I don't know if we can talk about that briefly. I know this is something that you explained to me, and it was one of them that I walked away from a conversation and went, "That's amazing." And I downloaded this app, which was a luxometer, because you were talking about lux again, not being a light expert, but bringing your commonsensical approach to it. Was like, hold on, if it reads this inside and then the reading is that outside, there's got to be something in it. I don't know if you want to quickly speak about that, because I thought it was really interesting.
It's just it's about the circadian rhythms. It's part of the 7 KSRIs. It's you can't take somebody to the start line unless they know this sort of stuff. And how do you take full advantage of everything you're eating, everything you're drinking, everything you're thinking, exercise, all the other health pillars, if you don't understand this process? So you've just got a brain with bodily function. And this daylight, it rises and it creates 100,000 lux, which is lumens, which is where you, and inside of there, there's an energy wave that does the serotonin, which we've touched on. So in the first 2 phases of the day, if you're outside all the time, you'd be evolved with 80,000 lux. Fact. As you're wandering around outside, your average would be about 10,000 lux, because you're looking up, looking down, it's not all getting through, and there's clouds and trees. So that's fact. So why don't you get a little light meter on your device and just check how much light you're exposed to? And so if you're sat in the office or wandering around the bedroom or in the kitchen or outside, and so it's just like, as you said, you wander outside and there's this little light meter go, oh, it's 80,000 lux. You wander inside into the kitchen, nothing more than 2 meters away. Now it's 2,000 lux. You wander into your office, now it's 150 lux. It sort of just fascinates you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That when we know that daylight, the blue light energy wave, blue light, creates serotonin, and serotonin in our brain unsuppresses everything and makes us feel happy and vibrant, absolutely makes us function like mad, is why wouldn't you want to find out just how much light you're exposed to? Because that creates all of these wonderful things. So just, why not? Easy, simple. And that, I have to say, probably with a lot of people, is a massive game changer.
Yeah, it certainly was for me. I mean, I restructured everything. I moved my desk close to the window, moved to the window. The office has got loads of windows. I spend a lot more time outside, even as a family and as the groups that I coach. We talk about getting your lux all the time. It's become this thing that we talk about that was there. We just never even connected the dots to think, hold on, if it's 80,000 out there and it's 150 in here, there's such a stark difference. There's got to be something in that.
There's got to be something in that. And when we know those other things, and it's all the time when we try, get the kids outside, get outside, do your exercise outside, and get them off their tech. My grandchild, who's 8, has suddenly got into, Fortnite, stuck in there with the headphones on, talking to his, using technology. But it's just like, it's easy to have a conversation with him. Like, the only way you can play Fortnite in a couple of hours is if we've recharged the batteries, the broadband, the electricity. Without the electricity and the internet, you ain't playing Fortnite. And it's a bit like, if you're not outside having a game of football with me, doing Wally or whatever, out there with the daylight, that's doing that. When you go back on Fortnite later, you're going to smash it. But if you don't come outside with me and charge your own brain up, as well as you need to charge the broad, it's just trying to have a language that's relevant with all of us.
Yeah.
Just a few minutes outside playing Wally with me, go back on Fortnite and smash it, right? And recharge the batteries and recharge this. I think the new generation, they understand about recharging. I think they understand about electric, and they understand about global warming. They understand about all these sort of things. And it's the right thing to do, sort of recharge, recharge. You can't do that unless you do this. You can do that, but you can't do that. And I think that's a nice place to be for them, is they understand the relationship with doing things that's in their world, but also they need to have a little bit of a human relationship on the other side as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the light thing is that it is that energy source, isn't it? You know, as sort of almost cliche as that appears, I think it's really important. It's become really important in the work that I do. It's like I need to get outside. I need to spend time outside to get that into my body. It's clearly good for us. We've evolved predominantly outside to the rhythm of, you know, the rise and fall of the sun. We've got to be outside a bit more, and it's just to encourage people. All these simple things, from optimizing sleep to spending more time outside, make a difference. They are the marginal gains that improve us all, whether we're parents or athletes or CEOs or whatever it is. It's all the same stuff. And just to sort of round it off, you know, you kept saying there about being coachable, and I love that. That's really important to me. It's being willing to listen and have your beliefs, you know, potentially changed, and embracing new concepts and ideas. That makes all the difference, because you just never know, do you? It could be just sleeping on your side, spending more time outdoors is the thing that actually unlocks, you know, your full potential, or just that smile comes back and that bounce comes back into life, or just knowing whether you're an AM or a PM and using that information to adjust your setup. All of these small marginal gains in aggregate to create massive wins. And I think that's, you know, certainly what we've discovered over the length of this chat today. So Nick, what are you up to right now, and where can we find out a bit more about you?
I couldn't have put that better.
Oh, good.
That was a great end to that conversation. Well done.
Good. So where can we find a bit more about you, Nick?
I think most people should just call you and
I'll tell them. That's usually how it works.
call you. Because I think you've been on your own little journey, haven't you, mate? And
Yeah.
And it's great to be a part of your world. And
Yeah, likewise.
so successful. So, you know, go to Andy Ramage if you've
Come to me, I'll put you next time.
then sportsleepcoach.com.
Sportsleepcoach.com.
Jump in there. You know, we've been trying to redefine sleep for a couple of decades. We're on another journey now. So we're on a really exciting new journey. So, you know, keep an eye on sportsleep.com.
Perfect. And we might get you on again at a later date to sort of dive a bit deeper into that. Top man, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
All right. Cheers, man.